Hey everybody, welcome back to the Back to Brilliance podcast. We're your hosts, Henry and Joseph. Thanks for tuning in. We ask that wherever you listen, that you would subscribe, leave a comment or a review. It helps great people like you find our podcast. And with that, today we're going to talk about living life by design, not by default. It's the power of identity engineering. In this episode, we're going to unpack how your current habits are shaping your future character, from our conscious discipline to the environmental structure. We break down how to align your systems with who and you want to become. So with that, I want to bring on our co-host, Joseph. Joseph, say what's up. Take it away.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? So today, as I always start, I wanted to talk about how habit building is not only a good habit, obviously, but it is a form of creating your life purposefully and with intention, right? So, a lot of people, they will form a habit, but they don't realize the power that they're giving themselves or that they're creating for themselves in creating a good habit in their life.
And one of the things about habits too is sometimes we think we're forming habits. A lot of times they've been handed down to us through, family members, as kids, and we just kind of carry on with that. And, you're kind of in autopilot at that moment. You're not really living life by design. It's sort of like on default mode. So that's what we're going to talk about, just creating the life that you want, So habits is probably the foundational points that serve us in our life, because a lot of times we just do things by habit, right? Like you get up in the morning, you wash your face, you brush your teeth with the same hand, you do the same motions, and it's just a habit. You don't think about it anymore. We just do it. So at its core, habit building is important, and understanding, where it comes from and is it serving you?
Yeah, and even talking, speech is a habit, right? You have a habit of pronouncing things a certain way. And, just going a little bit more directly, identity can be a creation and not a discovery. So, people will say, like, I'm trying to discover who I am, or I'm trying to figure out who I am. But I want to change that into I want to create who I am, or I'm trying to formulate myself or form myself to be who I want to be, right? I'm trying to create myself to be a better version of myself, rather than I'm trying to figure it out, right? So that it's a little bit more proactive if you create who you are. And, if you're not intentionally building out your habits, or you're not intentionally crafting yourself, like Henry just said, you're kind of living life on default mode because you're just going with what you were born with. And so, I also kind of want to point out that habits can reflect your self-image. So let's say that you don't have a habit of exercising, right? Well, that probably means that you don't care as much about your physical health because you don't exercise, right? People who are very health conscious, they'll want to exercise more. Or even, I'll take it to a step further, if you don't like to eat clean food, or if you primarily eat junk food, right? If your habit at the grocery store is to get snacks every time that you go to the grocery store, that will shed some light on maybe you're not as health conscious as you think you are.
Guilty. Very guilty. But yeah, those habits, they reflect your self-image, right? So it's like, if you're trying to change things, you have to build that habit of changing the things. So using that market example is like, those Hostess is not very healthy, though they are good, so it's like, okay, well, maybe I should skip it this time, and teaching yourself that discipline, it's going to help you, and it's going to build reinforcement in you that you are in actual control, as opposed to just being in default mode and just immediately reaching for that, So one of the other things that you can do, we talk about, visualizing and affirmations, this is another form to help you to create those habits, so when you see what you want, from your future self, you start working on it now by building these visualizations and affirmations that we have to tell ourselves, because it's a form of, identity engineering, if you will. So when you do these things, these are steps to help you to reprogram your subconscious and help you to build the blueprint for the life and the future that you actually desire.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I'm going to stick with the health thing because I feel like this relates to a lot more people. It's a little bit more universal. But, if you visualize yourself being, let's say that you have weight issues, visualize yourself looking at the scale and you've lost 30 pounds, right? And then you visualize yourself looking at yourself in the mirror after you weigh yourself. It doesn't have to be like a night and day transformation, that would be the ideal scenario, but something as simple, I say simple, but it's relative, but something as simple as, okay, I'm going to lose 30 pounds, right? And so you visualize that. Or, let's say you used to run a lot and now you don't run as much as you used to. So you visualize yourself running, right? Maybe you visualize yourself going on a walk that you used to go on a walk on, or, a trail that you used to walk, whatever, right? And that way you're kind of implanting it in your subconscious mind that you still do those things, right? And so that's actually what I've been doing recently, which is and it's actually kind of appeared in my dreams, right? I just had a dream last night. It was kind of a weird dream. It wasn't really focused on health, but I was like exercising and I was doing suicides, not the bad way, but the running back and forth or sprinting back and forth, right? And so so that in my head is like, because I've been visualizing myself doing those things again, right? Because where I am physically in life, it's not too great, just being a little transparent, but like, I'm trying to have that swing back, or that bring myself back to that brilliance of where I used to be physically. And so again, if you use the visualization, the affirmations, it will start to shape your identity, because you're no longer telling yourself like, oh, I'm a fat slob, or oh, I'm out of shape, or whatever. If you visualize yourself being in shape and being able to do those things again, you're not going to have as much resistance.
And one of the things that I come to realize is in life is a lot of times the reason why those habits are hard to break is because we've allowed so much things to happen to us that we just kind of like go numb to a lot of these things. So the things that we know that are good for us, we don't find ourselves doing. We find ourselves doing the bad habits, So, but the good thing is that like you can change it, That's something that I learned. Nothing is set in concrete. Everything changes, So if things change, just like seasons change, things can change in our life, So it's sort of like a spiritual truth, You can change the things if you choose to. And that's the key, is just choosing, understanding that you're not hardwired this way. It's not set in stone that you can't make things a different way. You're able to reprogram yourself, but it does take work, and a lot of times the reason why we just stay stuck in that default mode is because it's easier than going against the grain. It's easier than making the changes, and it in a daily thing, of our lives, we have a lot of requirements on us. So it is kind of hard, but you just take little incremental steps, little things at a time. Like Joe's was saying, we're simplifying it down to like, stay off the sweet aisle when you go to the market. That's a little thing, but it has a big impact over the duration, because you figure if you look at it and you say, oh, I'm just going to buy the 8-pack of Hostess cupcakes. Oh, okay, well, that's not a lot, and I won't eat them all, but you end up eating them all, right? So whether you eat them one a day and you ate it over eight days, or you eat 2 in a day, guilty, it's like, then you ate it in 4 days, and you feel like crap. So but the reality is that like, you're in control of it. So sometimes we just do it because we're trying to mask whatever it really is that we don't want to do or deal with, So, but you do have the power and authority to change it, but it's up to us.
Exactly. Yeah. We still have free will. Whether you want to get into the theological or scientific debate of that, right? We still have control over what we do every day, right? How Henry was saying, we're not hardwired. Things are not set in stone. And so, just practicing small things, you'll be able to rewire themselves. And that all goes back to just living life on purpose and not on autopilot. Because again, it may be a habit or, like I said before, right? Henry was saying it would be a habit for you to check out the sweet section, right? The baked good section, whenever you go grocery shopping. But if you start forming a habit of not going down that aisle, well, now you're curbing that autopilot, right? And so even something as small as, again, we've talked about it before, but just brushing your teeth with the other hand, or writing your name with your opposite, with your non-dominant hand, right? Even though it may seem silly, that will break your autopilot, right? And so even something that I'm guilty of is I will check my phone whenever I first wake up. And so, that's my conditioning, right? And so that's my autopilot. And so lately I've been telling myself to not, or even if I do, I tell myself not to open up certain apps, right? So whenever I wake up, I'll typically check my messages. I'll typically, lately it's been opening up Instagram, which I'm kind of ashamed of, but that's a story I'm telling myself. But you know, I'll close out of it, right? I'll catch myself in it. I'll be like, okay, I'm autopiloting. Let me just clear out of it, right? And so again, we're talking about living consciously and not on autopilot, right? So again, a lot of people they live reactively, but whenever you take a pause, you reflect, and you interrupt your cycles, your old cycles even, right? Again, if you're walking down the aisle, if you're grocery shopping, and you see yourself stepping into the sweets aisle or whatever, and you're like, oh, I don't need to go down the dessert aisle right now. That right there, that is you living consciously, because you're not just autopilot. You're not just walking into the aisle and then being like, oh, I didn't realize I got in here, right? So again, if you are able to be aware of what you're doing and you reflect upon it, well, now you're not living on autopilot.
And that's the thing, and the stores, again, they're marketers, and that's what it's all about, right? So they put it in your sphere, they put it in front of you, so that way, they know that we're creatures of habit, and the thing is sometimes those habits, again, when they're on default, it's just so easy to just pick it up and not even realize it, and then just go about your day, and then you're like, oh man, why did I do it? So use that, that conditioning, be conscious of your decisions that you're making, and it is a hard thing, which brings us to our next point. Discipline is a spiritual thing, in a sense, because it takes time, in any religion, any, whatever the spiritual growth thing or whatever you're into, you have to learn the ways, right? So it's a self-discipline. It isn't punishment, but it's choosing, what's hard now over what's hard later, so to speak, So it's always easy to just go take the easy route, but again, it comes with consequences as well. So, like we think, oh, it's not that bad, and that's where we begin to compromise, who we are, and sometimes that's how we end up in that default state, So like, for example, if you're always angry, it's hard for you to be a happy person, so you have to work at trying to pretend to be happy, right? Or try to pretend to be the jolly person, but when you release, let's say, anger, I'm just using anger as an example because I had to do this, but releasing anger, it takes a lot of work, it takes more to be angry than it does to be happy, in all honesty, but because sometimes you don't even know why you're mad. I'm just mad. Why? I don't know. And it's like, dang, dude, that's stupid. But as stupid as it sounds, but it's just because a lot of times the limiting beliefs, I can't overcome this. I can't let that go. I can't. And it's like, well, it's a discipline. You have to work on it. But over time, it begins to get easier and easier, so to speak, once it becomes a habit, because again, it's a good habit. And it's you're actually, when you make changes in your life, that's when you're truly living on purpose. When you don't, then you're just living on autopilot, and you have nobody to blame, for the results. So um, this is kind of like the warning sign, like you can live on purpose or you can live on autopilot. And if it's not serving you, then it's probably because you're on autopilot. If it's hurting you and you're putting in the reps, then you're living on purpose. And with that, you're going to get good results. That I can promise.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Then I want to second that. Right. It is a promise because, again, let's say exercising. Right. That's a very universal thing that no one really likes to exercise. Right. It hurts. You're gonna feel sore. You have to go to the gym. Typically, you have to do all these things. You have to prep for it. It's not a pleasant thing, but so many people do it, and they learn to love it because of what it gives them, right? A healthy body is a healthy mind, right? And so, if you even exercise the self-discipline, that in itself is an exercise, right? So, it's something that I do purposefully and personally is whenever I'm out and about, I try not to use my phone, right? And that makes me feel like I'm more connected to what I'm doing. I see everyone else that's on their phone, not doing, or, just kind of living on autopilot. And so again, kind of going back to the exercise thing, it's you have to do the boring stuff to see the growth, right? And so you're always training yourself, whether you know it or not, right? So again, if you train yourself, oh, it's okay for me to eat a snack at 12 a.m., right? That's not a common thing to do. But then if you do it for a month, you're like, okay, it's not that bad. I don't really see any issue with it other than me feeling, maybe physically bad in the morning, right? So then you'll train yourself like, oh, it's okay for me to eat a brownie at 12 a.m., right? And so you're never forming habits, but you're always becoming something, right? You're becoming something of your habits, right? So if you're taking action every day and you're like, okay, I'm going to study an hour a day, or I'm going to try to practice a skill every day. Well, now you're becoming better at that skill, which is forming and shaping who you are.
Yeah, every action that we take, it trains you for your future self. So like you said, habits. You're not, always form who we become. So and when you think you're not forming habits, you are. Again, you're just an autopilot and you don't see it. So you're not being conscious that it's taking place because it's so common to you. So every action though that you take, it's going to help you train and build that consistency and that discipline. So, a lot of times we procrastinate, because we don't want to change that habit. It's not that we don't want to, it's just we know it's going to take a lot of work. So we procrastinate and I'll do it tomorrow, or sometimes we start and then it's like, oh man, it's like working out when you go to the gym and you're just like, you go hard and then the next day you're sore and you're still sore and you're like, that's when you should go back, but you're like, well, let the soreness go away, and that soreness going away, giving that time, sometimes turns into days, weeks, months, even years before you begin to do it again. So a lot of times, the only time that we really make the changes and make habits is when it really, really affects us, right? So they say there's two things that motivate people: pain and pleasure, and we don't like the pain, but we have to go through it, so sometimes the habits, bad habits, they're not just inconveniences, right? Like they're anchors, they weigh you down, so you have to like really take the time to examine your life and see what's serving you and what isn't. Again, if you're an angry person, but really you enjoy being happy, so sometimes you work to be happy, then find a way to let go of the anger. Find out what's causing the anger. Again, the same thing goes back to what we're talking about. Like we're using Hostess. Sorry, Hostess, to put you out there, but that's my vice. They get me sometimes, you know. But the thing is that like acknowledging it and knowing like, okay, it's okay to have something, but you know, not always, right? Because it becomes bad. So, you know, just keep that in mind, you know, that bad habits, they're not just the inconveniences in our lives, they're anchors sometimes that just weigh us down.
Exactly, yeah. And it could be some small things, right? Like, if you get into the habit of snoozing your alarm whenever you're supposed to wake up, right?
Guilty.
Or yeah, I had to break that habit a couple times, to be honest. I formed it, I broke it, I formed it, I broke it, and yeah. So I mean, even though I don't like snooze my alarm, I will physically chill out, or like I'll physically lay there for a little bit longer, which is snoozing, right? But again, like my habit of I'll wake up and I'll start scrolling on Instagram, even though I do it for like maybe like 2 minutes maximum. But like, that's still a bad habit if I want to choose to look at it that way. And so again, those habits will shape who you are, right? Again, if you like to procrastinate and you set an alarm to do something and you're like, I'll do it later, right? You're still feeding into your habit of procrastination, right? So it's not about efficiency whenever it's eliminating a bad habit. It's about reframing it to be, I want ownership, or I want to truly live my life how I want to be, right? I don't want my habits to rule my life if they're not bad habits or if they're not serving me.
That's the thing is, like I said, a lot of times, you know, some habits are not so bad, but maybe they're not, you know, really serving you like that snoozing. You know, I have a habit of that. You know, it's just like I set 3 alarms. You know, to be honest with you, I set 3 alarms and I turn one off and the next one goes off in 2 minutes. And I'm like, all right, at this point, now I'm being a bum, right? So that's what kind of gets me up and gets me going, because it's like, you know, I'm allowing this to dictate my day, which would dictate my life, right? In cruise control or autopilot, you know? So, again, with that, guys, you know, live your life by design, not by default, you know, and you have the power and the control to engineer your life the way you want. You know, we're talking about the different things of understanding at its core, you know, what habits do and how habit building can really affect us. You know, habits reflect our self-image. So, you know, check our habits, you know, use visualization and affirmations to help you, to get you motivated and get you to reprogram the way you think, you know, and just know that, like, you know, your brain is never stuck on hardwire that it can't be changed. You can change it, but it's a process, you know. So live on purpose, not on autopilot. And with that, guys, you know, always keep training yourself, you know, seek out new habits. Again, if there's something that you're doing and you know it's not serving you, you can change it, you know. So with that, I want to ask Joseph if he has anything to add to that before we close it out.
Yeah, I just really want to second what you were saying about, you're constantly training yourself, right? Every day is another day to form a good habit and to continue your good habits, right? Try to eliminate your bad habits. Whenever people ask you, what are some bad habits? And you could list a whole laundry list, boom, there's a way, or like, that's a list to start working with, right? And so I want to give a shout out to our community of entrepreneurs tired of doing everything alone, right? If you have a community of people trying to help you out with identifying and keeping you accountable with your bad habits, well, you'll eliminate your bad habits quicker, right? I mean, a lot of my procrastination issues have been helped just by hanging out with Henry and doing all the stuff that we've been doing for our podcast. And so, we have practical self-growth tools, community support, as well as weekly structure to help you stay focused and follow through with whatever you're trying to do. So that's at backtobrilliance.com. If you scroll down to our community section, you'll see how to get connected to like-minded people like you.
Well said. Thanks for sharing that, bro. And again, guys, thank you guys for tuning in. You know, we appreciate you guys. Check out some of our other podcasts that we have on there. You know, we go through with a lot of good information. Check out the backtobrilliance.com, and don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment and a review. It helps great people like you find our podcasts. And with that, we're out. Until the next time, stay blessed.
Bye-bye.